Who are we starting this week at quarterback that we otherwise might wonder about?
Yeah, typically when a guy has 5 picks, you're going to maybe hesitate to start him the next week. No. And actually, Goff has not been good the last couple of weeks, but he's got the Jaguars. I mean, their defense has given up the 3rd most points per game to quarterbacks. 7 quarterbacks have had 18 plus points against them. 4 have gone over 26. This is the spot where Goff roars. And then Brock Purdy, who we told you to play last week, and he had a great game. Purdy is hot right now. 23 plus points in 3 of his last 4. The last time he played Seattle, this week's opponent, 24.1. Seattle has allowed 5 quarterbacks to beat them for at least 17.9 points, and all have come since week 4. The total in this game is pretty high. Start Brock Purdy.
Who are we sitting at quarterback?
A couple of big names. Jordan Love against Chicago. I think you probably saw this coming because you talk to me every single day. But in his last 3 games, 11.1 fantasy points per game. That's not good. He's also turning the ball over way too much. And this is a stat that I love that I've been bringing up for the last couple of weeks, is that only one quarterback has thrown for multiple touchdown passes in a game against Chicago. That was Trevor Lawrence. Everybody else is single digits. And no team in the National Football League has allowed fewer points per game to quarterbacks than the Chicago Bears. So for as much as we talk about their offensive struggles, their pass defense is nails. So I beware Love this week. And I'd beware Kirk Cousins. And I was wrong about Cousins last week. I thought he was going to have a good game. He did not. Now he's got the Broncos. They've allowed just 13.8 points per game to quarterbacks overall. And no quarterback at Mile High has scored more than 13.7 against them in a game. So Kirk Cousins is on my fade list. I still start Mooney. Drake London, I'm probably still starting, but I don't love the potential Surtain matchup. But I don't like Kirk Cousins.
All right. What about running backs? Who are we starting this week?
Kareem Hunt. He's been great. We talked about how he's right up there in terms of the touches per game average over the last month. He's averaging right around 17 points per game. Buffalo's defense is giving up 4.7 yards per rush. They've given up the 2nd most points per game to running backs. And enemy running backs, Lindsay, have scored 19 plus points 6 times. Yep. So this is a smash spot for Kareem Hunt in what might end up being his last start of the season. And then I'm going to go with Chase Brown. And I liked Chase Brown last week, even though the matchup was tough on Thursday against the Ravens. This week is not a good matchup either. The Chargers are really good defensively. But Chase Brown is getting a ton of touches. And he also is getting a 50% touch share in the Bengals offense since Zach Moss went out. So even though the Chargers are giving up the 3rd fewest points to running backs, I don't care. I'm starting Chase Brown.
What about running backs that we are less enthused about?
Not enthusiastic about James Cook. And I know you probably got to play him. I mean, there's 4 teams on a bye, and he's really good. He was one of the guys I really like coming into the season. But let me just explain to you how tough the Chiefs defense is against running backs. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 1, fewest points allowed. Number 2, no running back has scored more than 13.2 points against them in a game this season. You may say, well, Fabs, who have they faced? Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Rashad White, J.K. Dobbins, Jordan Mason when he was rolling. James Cook is not on the same level as Bijan or Derrick Henry or Alvin Kamara. So when you come at me and say, well, I can't sick James Cook, I understand. Maybe this is more for you guys in DFS where you avoid him based on his high price tag. But if you start him, temper your expectations because the ceiling is not good. And the same issue goes with Tony Pollard, who I didn't like last week against the Chargers. He did not have a great game. He's not 100%. He's dealing with a foot injury. He only played 29 snaps last week. Now he's got the Vikings, 4th fewest points per game allowed to running backs this year. I think we could see a little bit more Tajay Spears as well, which is what the scenario was last week for Pollard. Again, 4 teams off. I know you probably got to play them. Temper expectations.
What about the starts at wide receiver?
George Pickens. I'm so afraid that because everyone loves Pickens this week, and you know how sometimes when that happens, it goes sideways. I don't know if I've used George Pickens in one and done, but if I haven't, I am this week, and I'm scared because we're all going to be all over it. Wide receiver 8 in the last 4 weeks. Russell has got a rapport with him. The Ravens have allowed more fantasy points to perimeter receivers than any team in the National Football League. And of course, they gave up 55.4 to Jamar last Thursday night. So Pickens is a very good start this week. I have him in my top 10. And Cortland Sutton, hey, let's give the little golf clap to Cortland Sutton. He's been really good. He's been really good. Last week, the matchup was not great. He had 19 points. He scored 17 plus points in 3 straight games. With the development of Bo Nix has come a reliance on Cortland Sutton, which you talked about yesterday in the passing game. And now you look at Atlanta. They've given up the 6th most fantasy points to perimeter receivers since week 7, and they gave up 26 to Marcus Valdez-Scantling last week. So Cortland Sutton's a really good play this week based on the numbers.
You know who's not? All of the Bears wide receivers.
Oh,
all of them.
I know. I got DJ Moore on here, and I mean, maybe this is low-hanging fruit, but you drafted him to be your wide receiver 2 or 3, and you can't play him. Caleb's been playing terribly. He's one of the least accurate passers in the league lately. The Packers have allowed the 2nd fewest points per game to wide receiver since week 7. So, I mean, this doesn't just go for DJ Moore. Like Lindsay said, it's Keenan Allen, it's Rome Odunze. Like, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. Insofar as I don't think the pass attacks are going to do much. Now, look at Jaden Reed. And guys, I love Jaden Reed. You guys know that. Jaden Reed has been held under 14 points in 3 of his last 5 games, including 2 games where he's had single digits. And the Bears have allowed the 2nd fewest points to receivers overall per game, and no team has given up fewer points to slot receivers. And that's where Reed runs a lot of his routes. So yeah. I get it. You probably got to play Jaden Reed. It's not a good matchup, kids. All right, dirtbags. Let's talk about other ways to play fantasy football. Do you guys know about PrizePicks? It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks.
You can turn your hot takes into cash, Fabs. Listen here to figure out which players have the best matchups of the week. We always talk about guys that we like more or less depending on their matchup. Then take that information and flip on over to PrizePicks. See if you think that those players that we talked about will have more or less than the numbers that they have attached to them. It could be number of catches. It could be number of yards. It could be number of touchdowns. You can do it all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick and easy. And if you have a strong take about a guy that you don't have on your fantasy team, this is the place to put that take to work for you. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code FANTASYDIRT and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code FANTASYDIRT on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need a win to receive the $50 bonus. It's like free money, guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. What about tight ends? Who do we like this week more than usual?
Yeah, David Njoku's coming off a bye. And before the bye, he had a bad game. He had just 7.9 points, which is kind of mid for a tight end. Well, that's actually not that bad. I guess tight ends are pretty bad this year, but I had to get mid in for Lindsay. But he had scored 17 plus in his previous 2 games. And in week 11, he's got the Saints. They've given up at least 9.1 fantasy points to 7 different tight ends, including Jatavian Sanders, Luke Schoonmaker, and Lindsay's Will Dissly. So Njoku, I mean, at this point, is probably a must start. So maybe that is a little bit of low-hanging fruit. But how about Jonnu Smith? Jonnu Smith's been more involved in the passing game lately. At least 6 targets in 4 of his last 5 games. He's got the Raiders this week. They've allowed 25 or more points to 2 tight ends in the last 2 games. And no defense in the league has given up more fantasy points to tight ends than Las Vegas dating back to week 7. So if you are in a pinch, Jonnu Smith is available and potentially in your starting lineup this week.
There, who are we sitting?
2 players that are going to be in a lot of lineups. Evan Ingram is one of them. And I get it. You know, you got 4 teams off. How do you not play him? But the Lions defense has allowed 1 tight end to score double digits against them. 1. That's it. Okay. And they have faced Trey McBride, Tucker Kraft, Jake Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, and none of them did anything against Detroit. What's more, Mac Jones is starting again this week. You know what his passer rating was last week, Lindsay? It was 38.3. I mean, and then Jake Ferguson against the Texans. And maybe this is one of those like, damn it, the Cowboys stink. I'm sitting Jake Ferguson. I can't deal with it. And maybe I'm going to be guilty of that. But this is a player who had just 5 targets and was held to 4.4 points last week. Cooper Rush looked awful. Trey Lance is not good. And the Texans defense has allowed 1 tight end to beat them for more than 13.1 points this season. Just 1. So it's not a great matchup for Jake Ferguson. I mean, you may want to go with Jonnu Smith over Jake Ferguson this week. That's certainly an option. And I'll give you another player. If Dalton Kincaid does not go this week, Dawson Knox should be very, very startable against Kansas City.